What's up guys, hope you're doing great. If this is your first time here, my name is Louis and I invest in properties that can generate cash flow from day one. So if this is something you are interested in, please consider liking this video and subscribe to the channel and join our YouTube community. In this video, I'm going to talk about whether investing in a townhouse property is actually a good investment or not. So we'll look at it from two perspectives. The first one is living in the property and the second one is investing in the property to get a good rental return. So let's face it, most beginners starting out in their property journey consider investing in some form of sectional title property. This can be either an apartment or most of the time a townhouse. I own two townhouse properties myself and I wanted to share some of the mistakes that I made and what I did wrong as a beginner investor so that you guys don't have to make the costly mistakes yourself. The truth is, these townhouse properties are usually fairly priced, visually attractive and readily available to invest in. Most of the time they also have great locations as well as good security and shared expenses. So there's a lot of advantages to investing in townhouses and I am by no means telling you to completely stay away. I just simply want to share the things that's really important to consider before you invest your hard-earned money into these type of properties. A townhouse property is a traditional buy-to-let strategy where you have a property that you rent out to one family and hopefully generate a good rental yield at the end of the month. This is the idea, right? One of the most common mistakes many beginner investors make is underestimating the cost involved with property ownership, whether it's investing in a property or simply to live in the property yourself. Majority of people will have a repayment budget of, let's say, 7,000 Rand per month or a pre-approval of 700,000 Rand. The issue is majority of these people will go ahead and buy a property at the maximum amount of 700,000 Rand with the repayment being 7,000 Rand per month. But they forget about the extra costs involved with property ownership like rates and taxes, levies, maintenance, repairs, commission and even vacancy. So at the end of the day, your expenses will not just be 7,000 Rand, but it will look more like 9 or 9,500 Rand depending on the exact property. So imagine you only have a budget of 7,000 Rand to pay for your property, but once you start living in the property or rent out the property and suddenly the expenses skyrockets to 9 or 9,500 Rand. If you wanted to invest in a townhouse property, the calculations will look something like this. You will have an income of, let's say, 7,000 Rand and all of your expenses will be 9,500 Rand, meaning your shortfall at the end of the month is going to be 2,500 Rand. This results in a 30,000 Rand yearly shortfall that you need to pay from your own pocket. Imagine you only budgeted for 7,000 Rand in a month as a property owner or someone that lives in the property and now suddenly you have to pay an additional 2,500 Rand. This is obviously a lot of money that you need to pay out of your pocket, so it's definitely important to consider all the cost that is involved with townhouse ownership. Again, this is a traditional single-let buy-to-let strategy where you rent out the entire property to one person or one family. And most of the time, this is what majority of people will consider as a good property investment. And don't get me wrong, this strategy has made many millionaires all around the world and it will continue to do so if you understand three important tips that I will share in just a moment. I prefer to invest in properties that can actually put money in my pocket from day one, which is usually student accommodation, multi-lets or even short-term rentals. If you want to learn exactly the strategy that I follow to generate cash flow on a monthly basis, please consider enrolling in my coaching program or property course, and I'll share the link down in the description. Don't get me wrong, there's absolutely nothing wrong with investing in a traditional buy-to-let strategy. The issue is majority of people buying these properties don't have the money to cover the shortfall on a monthly basis. Imagine you own your first property which has a shortfall of 30,000 Rand a year. How will you be able to manage, let's say, 5 or 10 properties? Imagine you have 10 properties with a 30,000 Rand yearly shortfall each. That means you have to pay 300,000 Rand a year from your own pocket just to keep these properties running. With that said, if you are considering investing in a townhouse, whether it's to live in it yourself or to rent it out on a monthly basis, there's three main points that I want to share with you that will ultimately mitigate the risk involved with these property strategies. The first way to mitigate the risk of investing in a townhouse property is to simply have a healthy reserve fund available. This means you should have a certain amount of money set aside just for your property portfolio. I like to use a rule of thumb to have a 10% reserve fund of the purchase price for each and every property you own. So if you purchased a townhouse for 700,000 Rand, you should have 10% or 70,000 Rand set aside for your shortfalls, for vacancies, repairs and maintenance. If you can build up a healthy reserve fund, this is simply the easiest way to mitigate the risk involved with owning single-let properties. Unfortunately, most average South Africans don't have this type of reserve fund for their properties, and it ends up putting them in a worse financial position. Most people end up not paying their rates and taxes and levies first, resulting in massive interest charges on these expenses, and at the end of the day, this can cause a lot of financial stress and strain. The second tip to mitigate the risk of owning a townhouse in South Africa is to simply hold on to the property for the long term. Long term can be from 20 to 30 years in my opinion, and if you buy a property and sell it after 5 years, chances are you will lose a lot of money. If you are able to hold on to your townhouse for 20 or 30 years, no matter what happens, you will make money guaranteed. At the end of the day, the single-let strategy is a longer term investment strategy. So if you invest in a townhouse, just make sure you are able and willing to hold on to it for at least 20 or 30 years. Most of the time, a traditional buy-to-let strategy will break even at around 10 years, meaning at the 10th year, you should be able to receive some sort of cash flow because you should be able to raise your rent during this period and hopefully your income surpasses your expenses, meaning you will make some sort of cash flow. Holding on to property over the long term can be very rewarding, and like I said, many people have become multimillionaires following this traditional strategy, but I'm sure that they had a long-term mindset from the beginning. The third and final tip to mitigate the risk of townhouse ownership in South Africa is to buy the property for less than it's worth. This is something that I love to share with people because imagine you can buy something for 100,000 Rand cheaper than it's actually worth. This, number one, will give you a healthy equity position that at the end of the day will increase your overall net worth, and it also mitigates the risk if you ever had to sell the property because you bought it for cheaper than it's actually worth. This is an easy and simple way to build your net worth using property, and remember, you can always use the equity available in the property to cover your shortfalls on a monthly basis. I like to think that if you follow these three tips, you will be able to succeed with townhouse properties. At the end of the day, investing in a townhouse property can be a good investment. You just need to be aware of the risks involved and how to mitigate these risks. Like I mentioned, I own 2 townhouses myself, but I decided to invest in different strategies to diversify my portfolio, and I wanted to share the things that you need to be aware of before you just buy a townhouse property. I like to think of a traditional single-let strategy to be a store of wealth and not necessarily a creation of wealth. And what I mean with this is most people that own a lot of single-let properties made their money somewhere else and decide to invest it in single-let properties so that they can continue to grow their wealth over the longer term. If you want to create wealth, you should consider the multi-let strategy, and that's exactly what I teach in my property course and coaching programs. So again, consider checking out the link in the description.